So let's take a look at lesson 8.2, area of triangles. Area of triangles takes us one step further than what we did with the area of parallelograms. So when we look at our goal or our objective for this particular lesson, we want to be able to understand how parallels can be divided in half or decomposed into two congruent or two equal triangles and do the work in that. So as we see this particular shape, we can see a parallelogram. Once again, a parallelogram, what we did yesterday, is a four-sided shape or quadrilateral where the opposite sides are equal. And what we can see is with that dotted line that if I divide it in half, I should be able to get two equal or two congruent triangles. If I find the area of the parallelogram, I simply need to know the base times the height. So once again, if it doesn't have a right angle in it, that's why we refer to base and height, because we have to create a right angle. So the base would be the bottom, and then I'm going to multiply by the height, which is going from bottom to top, making a right angle, and then I would multiply those two together. That would tell me that I have 8 times 12, which gives me the 96 square units that they're talking about here in the book. Now, when I look at it and I see that I have two congruent triangles, then I really only want the area of half of it. So when I look at the book at the bottom and they give me the wording as well as the symbols for the formula for the area of a triangle, they give it to you in two different ways. They have 1/2 times base times height, or area is equal to base times height divided by 2. I prefer to use the second one. The reason being is when it's the 1/2 times b times h, or 1/2 times base times height, students get a little confused as to what the math process is because they're multiplying by a half first. Well, if we can say we have base times height and then divided by 2, that tells me the order in which the things need to go that I'm going to do. If I simply multiply the base and height together first and then divide by 2, it's the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. But that's going to give me the area of my triangle each and every time. Let's look at the example that they give us here for example 1 then. If I know that I have base times height divided by 2 instead of the multiplying by 1/2, then I'm just going to fill in with the information that they give me. So my base at the bottom is the 6, my height is the 4, so I'm going to multiply those two together first and then divide by 2, because once again, it's half the area of a parallelogram. So when I take 6 times 4, I get 24, and I'm going to divide it by 2. And 24 divided by 2, then I know mathematically is going to be 12. If I have 12, then I simply need to remember that when I am doing area, I'm always going to take the label and I'm going to square it. So remember that we have to have square centimeters in this particular question. You can put an SQCM, or you can put the CM with the superscript of 2, or the exponent of 2 for your answer. All right, so when we do this particular question then, they give us just some basic information for this triangle. If I knew that it was going to be a parallelogram where I flip that particular triangle and have two of them, then I would have an overall area of 5 times 2. But since it is a triangle, I would take the area of the parallelogram and divide by 2. So I'm going to take base times height, 5 times 2, divided by 2. 5 times 2 is 10, and 10 divided by 2 is simply 5. So hopefully that's pretty easy. It shouldn't be difficult. It's just adding on to what we did yesterday. Just keep in mind that you can't just put the answer 5 though. We are finding area, therefore we have to use the measurement label they give us, and we have to square it. All right, so if we know how to find, all right, so let's apply what we just did into this math problem, but now we have to review once again how we're going to work with these mixed numbers, right? Whole numbers and fractions are mixed numbers. I know I'm multiplying because the parentheses are showing that I'm multiplying the 5 1/5 times the 3 1/2. So I have to change those into improper fractions in order to multiply them. Once again, I start at the bottom, I multiply and add. So I start at the 5 and I say 5 times 5 gives me 25. I add, so I have 25 plus 1, and that's going to give me a numerator of 26. And then I simply keep the denominator I started with. I have to do the same thing with the 3 1/2. So I'm going to start at the bottom, multiply and add. 2 times 3 is going to give me 6. And then when I add the numerator, 6 plus 1, that gives me a new numerator of 7. And I keep the denominator of 2. Now I have a math problem that I can do. Now I can multiply the 26 over 5 times the 7 over 2. That's going to give me the area of a parallelogram, which then we'll have to finish up doing as a triangle. Now, once again, when I multiply fractions, I like to cross reduce as I possibly can to work with smaller numbers. You don't have to, but what I'm going to show you on this problem is how to cross reduce on your numbers. So when I see that I have 26 and 2, they are both even. Therefore, I know I can reduce by 2s. Once again, reducing simply means to divide top and bottom by the same number. So if I'm going to reduce by 2s, then I ask my questions. How many times will 2 go into 2? 2 goes into 1, and 2 goes into 26 13 times. That's as much as I can reduce this particular problem. So how do I multiply fractions? I simply multiply across. So when I take my denominator of 5 times 1, I get a denominator of 5. And then I multiply my numerators of 13 times 7, and I get 91. Now, I don't want to change that back into a mixed number and divide and find an answer because I'm not done. Once again, the process of finding the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. And if I'm dividing and I have a fraction or multiplying and I have a fraction, I know I can't just use a whole number, therefore I have to put 2 over 1. But I can't do division of fractions. So once again, I have to KFC the math problem. I have to keep the first one, 91 over 5. I have to flip the second one. So instead of having 2 over 1, I'm going to have 1 over 2. And then I change, that's what the C stands for, the division into multiplication. I check to see if there's anything that I can cross reduce, and there's not. So I have a multiplication of fractions question. Can I multiply fractions? Yes. How? I simply multiply across. So when I do my denominators, 5 times 2 is 10. 91 times 1 is simply 91. Now I can finish it up and find the actual answer. Once again, improper fractions can't be left as improper fractions, or as sometimes we call them, top heavy. So I have to look at a fraction as division, and the top number always goes inside the division box. So how many times will 10 go into 91? It'll go in 9 whole times, and that would give me a remainder of 1. So therefore, I have my remainder is my numerator, and my divisor is going to be my denominator. So my final answer is 9 1/10. Notice the label is already given there for you as square feet. All right, so let's do a check on here. So I would like you to work out this particular problem on your own. Pause the video, come back and check your work and see how you did. So hopefully you have an answer. Let's see if you have the correct answer. So when I'm looking at it and I see that I have a triangle and I have some measurements of base and height, 12 and 8, then I know that my formula for area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. So hopefully you just plugged in the information, 12 times 8 divided by 2, and 12 times 8 is 96. So 96 divided by 2 is going to give me, 2 goes into 9 4 times, which is 8, remainder of 1, and I bring down my 6, and 2 goes into 16 8 times, and therefore my answer is 48. However, if you just put 48, you're going to be missing a point because you have to have a label when we're doing measurements in geometry. Therefore, I look at it and it says inches, and I know since it's area, has to be square inches. That's your complete answer. Well, in the same way that we looked at the area of a parallelogram using the formula, but we were given an answer and missing one of the measurements, we're going to do the exact same thing with our triangles. We're simply going to write the formula and plug in the information that I know. Once again, our formula for area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. That gives me my area. So if I plug in the information that I know, I don't have my base, I just have the variable of b. And then I have 6.2 as my height. When I look at this math problem, then I have to think all the way back to lesson 6, where we had algebraic equations and we had to solve for the variable. I have to find the variable, which is b, and then I'm going to do the opposite function to get rid of it and do it on the opposite side. When I see that I have some lonely math happening, which is the division of 2, then that's what I have to start with. So instead of having division of 2, I'm going to get, in order to have my b by itself, I'm going to multiply by 2. And that just simply cancels out on the side of the variable. Now I go to the opposite side, and I'm going to multiply by 2. Well, 24.8 times 2 is 49.6. I keep everything else. So my new math problem becomes b times 6.2 is equal to the 49.6. When I look at my variable, I'm multiplying by 6.2. In order to get rid of it, I have to divide by 6.2. That cancels it out. That does give me my variable and my b by itself. So now I'm going to go to the opposite side and divide by 6.2. If I put my top number on the inside of my box, I divide by my bottom number, my denominator, then I see that I have a decimal on the outside of my box. I have to OOU it. I have to move it on the outside one time to make it a whole number. Therefore, I have to move it on the inside one time, and then I'm going to bring my decimal up. Well, when I divide 496 by 62, I get a whole number of 8, which is 496. So we're finding that b is equal to 8. But what's my measurement? So once again, I'm finding the measurement of one of the sides of my triangle. Therefore, I have to have a straight unit and not a squared unit. So my measurement should just simply be centimeters. Make sense? I hope so. All right. So I want you to go ahead and work out this problem on your own. Pause the video, come back, and see how you do. So hopefully you looked at the previous example, because this is going to be done exactly the same way. When I'm given the base times height divided by 2 is going to be my area, and I still have a b as my variable, I'm going to plug in now 3.2, and I know that's going to be equal to the overall area of 11.68. I have to start the same way. I'm dividing by 2 where my variable is. That's my lonely math that's happening. So I'm going to do my opposite function and multiply by 2 to get rid of it. And then I'm going to go to the opposite side and do the same math. So multiplying by 2 to get my b alone cancels those out. I go to the opposite side, 11.68. I pick up my handy dandy calculator, and I see that that's equal to 23.36, or 23 36 Now I'm left with b times 3.2. In the same way as the previous question, I now have to get rid of my multiplication with that decimal, so I'm going to divide with it. So I'm going to divide with 3.2, which simply cancels that out, so I have my variable. I'm going to take my 23.36 and now divide it by 3.2, or 3 2/10. Put the top number inside the division box, divide by 3.2. Well, can't do that. Have to do my over up. So hopefully you moved it once on the outside, you moved it once on the inside, and then brought your decimal up. 32 goes into 233 7 times. So if you had 7 and stuff on your calculator, then all you do is focus on the 7, because 7 times 32 is 224. That gives us a remainder of 9, and you bring down your 6, and therefore 32 will go into 96 3 times. That is 96. You don't have a remainder, so you know your b is equal to 7.3. But did you remember to include your label? When I look at the back at the problem, I see that my straight units is meters, so hopefully you had b is equal to 7.3 meters. All right, so we are on track of keeping this under 25 minutes, which once again is my goal, to allow you plenty of time to get your assignments done here in class. However, if I'm going too fast, please pause, rewind, rewatch as many times as you need to, and listen to what I'm saying other than just duplicating what my screen says. These videos, once again, will be available to you on Canvas until the end of the school year. And then in 7th grade or 8th grade, if you're struggling with these, you have access to my YouTube. You can watch it as many times as you need to, as long as it helps you be successful. Once we get done with this question, then we'll have time to work on our assignment, which is going to be 6 questions, 2 through 12, which is the evens. Now, as I have said before, I have not used the cubes pattern until this year, thanks to Mrs. Gallagher. She showed it to me, and I've found that 5th graders have been helped a great deal understanding story problems during study tables. And the other 6th grade class who are struggling with story problems have asked me how to answer questions, and I show them this process, and they really understand a lot better. So those of you who are struggling to understand your word problems, give in and just follow along. I will show you what to mark and why we're marking it. So listen and you'll understand, and then word problems are going to become much easier for you. I have found that I'm doing it now when I'm making my answer keys, and I understand the math problems even better. So if we cube it, once again, we circle important numbers and labels. We're going to box in important math terms and indicate what they're telling us. We underline our question. We evaluate what we're going to be doing, which means think about the steps we're going to do and eliminate any nonsense information. All right, so first we're told Vladimir, you can say V if you don't like saying Vladimir, is planting wildflowers in the corner of his yard as shown. When I look at the garden, the image they give us, notice in the top right-hand corner that little pink box type area. Once again, that's telling us that's a 90-degree angle, so I can use the measurements that they give me. It says a packet of wildflower seeds costs $4.95. All right, so when I look at other words that are important in there, you might want to box in the word A. We don't think about that as a math term very often, but it is important for this one. A packet, that tells me that I have one packet. So for every one packet I spend $4.95, I'll need that to solve this problem. It says that one packet is going to cover 50 square feet. Well, 50 square feet, that's the number and label that I need, but I'm going to also box in the word cover. We don't think about that as a math term, but it's telling me that I've got a unit rate indicated there. For every one packet that I have, it's going to cover, or it's going to be 50 square feet. That also is going to be important as we work through the problem. What we're being asked to do then is to figure out how much Vladimir is going to spend. So I need all of that information in order to solve my problem. It is a triangle, therefore I start with my base times height divided by 2. I plug in my base and my height into the formula, and I have 15 times 15 divided by 2, which if I take 15 times 15, I get 225. So the math that I need to do to figure out what the area is for this triangular garden is to divide 225 by 2. All right, well, I can do that. So will 2 go into 2? Yes, it will. It'll go in once because 1 times 2 is 2. I have nothing left over. I bring down my next number. 2 goes into 2 once. 1 times 2 is 2. Nothing is left over. I bring down my 5. 2 goes into 5 2 times because 2 times 2 is 4. Now I have 1 left over. Well, I don't have anything else. So that means I need to add a decimal and I need to add a 0 and bring it down. And then I have 2 times, or how many times will 2 go into 10? Well, it goes in 5 times. Now, the reason that I made it as a decimal instead of a mixed number, which some of you prefer a mixed number, is because when I remember the steps that I'm going to do and that I circled up above, I know I'm going to be dealing with money. And that's always written in a decimal form. I don't want to try to multiply my decimal of 495 by the $12 or 112.5, as a mixed number. So if there's a decimal that I have to use in my math later, go ahead and write my answer as a decimal. And that's one step that I don't have to change as I go on. But what we found is simply the area of the garden itself is 112.5 or 112.5 square feet. Now, remember that unit rate that we had with the A packet is going to cover 50 square feet. So if I know that I have 112.5 square feet, and that's a division problem, right? I'm going to take my 112.5 and divide it by the 50. I raise my decimal anytime I'm going to divide a decimal by a whole number, and I ask how many times will 50 go into 112? Well, that goes in 2 even times because 2 times 50 is 100. I bring down my 2 and my 1. I don't need to go on in the math problem. The reason being is I do have a remainder. Now, if you want to solve for this, you're more than welcome to. You just simply don't have to. Because if I have a remainder, then I know that 2 packets is not going to cover my triangular garden. So instead of buying 2 packets, I'm going to have to buy 3. And if I have 3 packets, now I can see that I have the $4.95 per packet. All right, so if I have $4.95 and I'm buying 3 packets and I multiply those, then I'm going to take 3 times 5, which is 15, put down my 5 and carry my 1. And 3 times 9 is 27 plus 1, well, that's 28. So I put down my 8 and put my addition of 2. And then 3 times 4 is 12 plus 2, that gives me 14. Now, it's not going to cost me $1,485. Right? So that should be one of those things when I look at my answer and I think, well, I'm not going to spend that much buying wildflower packets, right? Then I have to think logically, okay, what is my next step? I multiplied a decimal number, so therefore I have to count my decimal spaces. In my math problem, there are 2, so I have to move my decimal from right to left 2 times. So my answer is $14.85, which seems much more reasonable to buy wildflowers to cover my garden. All right, if you have any questions, please ask. If not, then the assignment will be yours to show me that you took your notes, and I will give you your assignment. You should have plenty of time to get it done because you have an hour. If you have questions, please ask.